Michael? There we go. We're good.
No, I don't see the agenda.
No, I don't, but it's good. They had the agenda from them. I'll read it down. There's nothing heavy on it. Again, thanks a lot for being here today. We have quite a number of people out there, so I'll go down the list. And as usual, if you have questions, type them in, and Deborah Leppert will shoot them to me. And the more questions, the better, because that will keep me from having a 35-minute monologue. So let me just start at the top. The 10% FMAP status. As of last Wednesday, the 10% FMAP has not been approved by CMS. I don't think South Carolina is any different than any other state. I Googled this morning and I didn't see any other state out there with approving the 10% FMAP. HHS submitted the statewide plan on or about July 12th, and they have gotten some questions from CMS, which they've already responded to. So we're just in a waiting pattern for them to approve our plan in whole or part, and then we will get going. So that's the current status for that. And if I hear a scintilla of information that it's moving one way or another, I will let you guys know. Fy22 appropriations. I'm going to change this up a little bit because there's been some information since we got this out the door. I want to talk a little bit about the $7.2 million respite appropriation. I sent an executive memo out last Thursday, and HHS contacted me that same day, and they advised that they have raised the respite rate to $16.22 an hour, up from $12.69, which is a 27% increase. At the current time, we only have one rate. So that one rate serves both businesses as well as self-directed individuals. So we're hoping to get another rate in the IDRD waiver renewal so that we have two separate rates with a little bit of separation between the two to increase access, but one in the hand beats two in the bush. So when they raise the rate to $16.22, I think we will just roll with it, and it's good news. For clarity purposes, if you are in a self or family directed situation where you are getting processed through the Charles Lee Center, your current rate will be $13.72 will be your after-tax rate. What we do with the 1622 is we serve as the administrative agent for, we will take 40 cents per hour and it will go toward the fiscal agent costs. We will pay the FICA taxes for the employer employee, which is 15.3%, whether it's self or business. And then what's left is $13.72 for the self-directed caregiver. Given that we only have one rate at 1622, the business rate has gone up 27%. You are free to conduct business. At the current time, we do not have a minimum caretaker rate associated with a business using the respite rate. I caveat that by saying we don't have it at this particular time, but what we want to do is wait until the IDRD waiver renewal gets finalized to see if there's a second service out there. And at that time, we will do more planning on how we're going to work the two rates together on January 1st. But in the meantime, that's the one rate. I know there was some questions out there. If I'm a business or I'm a board and I'm providing that rate, do I have to provide a minimum salary? And the answer is no at this time.
Question.
All right.
Two questions on respite. The original budget ask submitted to the budget office states there is a minimum pay rate. Are you all not requiring a minimum rate for providers? DDSN proposes raising the rate from $12.69 to $15.41. The increase is required to pay a minimum of $12 an hour. Employment tax is adequate. Risk, provider cost, an increase in participation, but I guess this is quoting. This is the wording from the original budget ask.
What's the question?
I don't know.
Let me address that.
Okay.
Let me address that. And that is, In the budget ask, we asked for 1541. When we did our calculations for the IDRD waiver renewal, that rate went up a click with those calculations. The rate that came out of the HHS was 1622. HHS is the rate setters, that is the rate. As I said a minute ago, we reserve the right to set a minimum caregiver rate. I mean, we have the right. I don't know, businesses hadn't done it. It would only apply to boards. We have 10 boards left doing this service, and we're going to talk to all those boards individually because they will have to make some decisions on how they will move forward given the requirements to work in EVV. In short, the boards are going to have people self-directed through Charles Lee, or they're going to have to be a business and bill through HHS. We're not excluding some middle ground option at this time. This rate came upon us on short notice. But right now for EVV to work, as well as the people, the boards that were doing it currently, some of them considered themselves as coordinating self-directed rate. I think they were probably kidding themselves that they were not in the business because they were taking part of the rate as revenue. So in many respects, I think those that were operating in the hybrid model felt like they might have been in a self-directed mode when in fact they were employees. So we need to talk to all 10 boards, clarify roles and responsibilities. And if there is a middle ground to be had, you are still going to probably end up being a business as opposed to a third-party facilitator for the individual. Because if you take any part of that rate, it probably puts you in the same boat as a business as far as individual liability for the individual out there. So I'm not going to put a minimum rate on that until it settles and until if we have a second a second rate from the IDRD waiver renewal. And if we do establish that minimum rate, Pat Maley's not going to establish that minimum rate. The commission is going to establish that minimum rate if we are so inclined. So everybody has to stand by for that second rate.
It says, second question is why only CLC would be retro and not other providers?
I can answer.
Okay.
Okay, they're not. The plan is that effective with the beginning of this current payroll that you're in for respite, whether it's Charles Lee or whether it's a board, is where the rate change is effective. Nobody is being retroed back to July 1st.
Oh, no, I think we are.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was an email.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's all going to be retro back. If you were paid from July 1st forward, we're going to have to do the math and we're going to have to go back and make those calculations. Any more respite questions?
Is CLC going to retro pay the caregivers?
I think we have to do that, but it's going to be a lot more math involved than that, and they're going to have to stand by until we do the math on that.
Okay.
All right. Let me go into the appropriations. Literally effective this morning, the $10 million appropriations for daily residential habilitation went up it's approximately 3.4%. Those rates, which we'll send something out here after this meeting, each one went up approximately $9 for Haskell, $8 for IDRD. And they will be effective immediately and they will be retro back to July 1st. Again, that is only for the appropriation. It is not factoring in the 2.5% COLA, which I'll talk about in a minute, nor is it considering, not to be confused with whatever rate comes out of the IDRD waiver renewal. So it's almost like the trifecta. This is the first one, and we appreciate HHS acting on this rather quickly. And I think they're doing it because they see there's stress in the system with our DSP crisis, and this will put immediate more funds in the provider's pocket as quick as possible. Let's talk a minute about the 2.5% COLA. There's a 3 o'clock finance meeting today, and at that meeting, part of the CFO section is going to be discussions about options that we have to use the levers we have in order to expedite getting funds available to us, to the providers, to address the current DSP crisis. Options that I developed would be obviously to front the 2.5% COLA. And when the rates get passed by Medicaid and they give us a retroactive for the rates that they can give us a retroactive on, we'll settle up at that time. Obviously, the 3.4%, $10 million residential is taking effect immediately. And we do not have the retroactive back to July 1st, but we could possibly front that as well. And the 10% FMAP, we had a meeting last week. I think it was last Wednesday for the 10% FMAP, and a lot of the focus was on budget items 1, 2, and 3, which we can execute, assuming our plan is approved, and we can execute them shortly after approval. And those 3 combined total $9.5 million. And right now we're doing some analysis on how to execute those funds and how to allocate them fairly across the board. The first 2 have to do with gap funding, $1 million. The second budget is $7 million for the new employee and incentives for new employees and retaining employees. And the third one was the state-funded at-home increase of $7 per unit. All 3 of them combined, if we retro the utilization for at-home back to April, would be $9.5 million. So those things are sitting in the queue, and we're discussing this afternoon, so that when we can push that money to the provider network as soon as possible, as long as we get the proper approval through the commission for all 3 particular options. Any questions on that? Okay. We also, last week, just a number of... Yes.
Yeah. Back on that, I believe the commission gave several possibilities for y'all to study as far as number of employees, size of your budget, and I can't remember what the third one was. Yep. On numbers 1 and 2. Well, that was on
number 3.
Number 3.
Yes. And number 1 and 2. No. Yeah, Ralph, what we're going to do is we're almost done that. We had a few tweaks to it. We're going to send out, basically it was based on either revenue of the provider, FTEs of the provider, or salary of the provider, both of which the last 2 came from the most recent FTE reports. And based on those 3 allocation methods, we ran all 3 scenarios, and they all come out about the same. I think if you're a business that has more personnel costs than non-personnel costs, you do better. And if you have more non-personnel costs, you do less, but they were all in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I was curious about the respite funds that flow through Charles Lee, for example. That's the only big difference, I think, isn't it? As far as size of budget, does that get counted into their budget? Which isn't as staff intensive as providing direct supports.
Well, I have to process that one for a minute, but just the way we did it, Ralph, was we looked at everyone's fiscal 21 revenue from us, if we're going to skis, to see how much we paid you. And then the second and the third one are basically come off the recent FTE reports. And
that they submitted to us.
That they submitted to us. They're self-submitted. So we will line up those 3 data. We'll allocate it. It's the same amount of money. It's just allocated 3 different ways. And right. One's a little, just like I said before, if you have more personnel costs than most, then you're going to get a little better. If you have more non-personnel costs, you're going to do a little worse. But they're all in the same general direction. We'll send it out with that sensitivity information in it, and ultimately we'll get some feedback and we'll make a decision on how to allocate it. But when you add those 3 budgets together, That's $9.5 million waiting at the starting gate for 10% FMAP. And I think we should be pretty close. I foresee, but I don't have any basis other than I think there's a lot of pressure across the country to get this moving. And so we look forward to that time.
Thank you.
All right. Last Tuesday, and again, I thank you for all the provider input you guys call, and you give a lot of what I would say on the ground, real world description of the DSP shortage. And I guess to me, after what I heard in the last week and looking at our own information at the regional centers, how not only is hiring much more challenging, we're losing people at a much higher rate. And for all the reasons that we've talked about, labor shortage, stressful conditions, COVID, to me, it's crossed over from a shortage to a crisis. We did make a request to HHS for an Appendix K short-term rate increase for residential. We're still waiting on that result. And again, we were not going to make it for forever. We're just trying to make it to the end of the year because we believe that right now, a lot of providers are hesitant to raise their salaries to attract more or to retain more because of uncertain future revenues. And so we're trying to get as much surge money out there as possible. And obviously the sustainable rates will come from the IDRD waiver renewal, which, as Margaret said this morning at the HSP meeting, on September 25th, they closed it for public vetting. So I imagine we have to have those rates before September 25th. And I assume it'll be hopefully sooner rather than later. And that will really give us a good benchmark for sustainability. And I'm optimistic given everything I've seen and how they prepare those rates and how they factored our excess costs into the system. So we have to wait and see, but I'm optimistic. Any questions?
Susan John said, please also know that it's not just DSPs we're having issues with. We're experiencing significant turnover in early intervention and case management as well. Raising the rate for DSPs creates a gap issue with house managers, EIs, case managers, direct lead support, etc. It affects all areas.
I could not agree more. And I apologize for that oversight. It is a system-wide issue. It's just, we hear more when people don't show up for shift is where we're focusing on dialogue, and not that anybody else is going to be excluded. It's just that what I hear in the community, what I hear at the regional centers, it is beyond just a shortage. And today at the Finance Committee meeting, I welcome you to tune in. I think that will be a big point of discussion. At the commission meeting coming up, I think that will be a focus as well. I'll go down my list. Ppp testing. I sent out an executive memo, I guess right around the 1st of September. I had a spare time. I was trying to catch up. I don't want to spend a lot of detail on that because it's in the memo, but the short story is we looked at what was claimed on the fiscal year 20 financial statements, as well as the cost reports, mainly financial statements. And it showed about 2.6 million of PPP claimed for fiscal year 20. And then for those 15 boards or providers that, the boards in particular, because it's capitated, we looked at their fiscal year 19 cost reports compared to their 20. And what we found was actually in fiscal year 20, just, even with the $2.6 million that never made it to the cost statement because it's related to COVID, those boards cost reported to us actually went up in 20 as opposed to 19. So I look at that and it seems to me that we're at much less risk of the double dipping issue that we've talked about for some time. And I give everybody accolades for the restraint and how they handle their accounting. You're in the middle of fiscal year 21 financial statements in the county, and just use that same eye, and I think we'll all be okay. But I thought that was good news that what could have happened, it did not happen, and I thank you for that. Commission task forces. At the last commission meeting, there's a number of them going on, and I don't want to. I don't want to go over all of them, or I'm afraid I'm going to miss one. But just needless to say, when the commissioners went out to the various congressional districts and had their listening tour, they picked up more than just how to build a 10% FBAT budget. They heard a lot of things that they felt needed their personal attention, and they've established task forces to address them. Obviously, we have a task force for 10% FMAP, which we have got going, and when the money gets issued, it will go into full throttle. But we have one on ICF task forces, we have a communication one, we have an autism task force, just things that the commission felt like it needed their personal attention. And I thank you for contributing your time and energy to them. And I think we're going to build momentum as the fall and winter comes on all these. The potential conversion of residential services on January 1st of 22. We have one thing between now and us doing that, and it all has to do with getting individual tiered residential settings and rates in the IDRD waiver renewal. If that happens, we're fee for service 100%. Nothing can stop us because the waiver will start on January 1st. As you heard Margaret speak this morning, if you listen to the human service providers, the intent of the IDRD waiver is to do just that. They have not actually committed to rates yet because they are still hammering furiously on the details and the complexity of building a rate. And most of you have been around rates for a long time. They're really trying to get it right by looking at the cost from our 19 cost report, as well as looking at building up the assumptions that Milliman has been painstakingly going over. And when these two come together, I believe we're going to have rates in the waiver, and that will signal fee for service. But we can't actually start the green light activities until we get that indicator. Back here, we've been thinking and noodling this for a long time, but we really can't start until we get started. So stand by, but once that happens, and I'm optimistic it will happen, we will start a regimen of activities to get us to fee for service by January 1st. Some of the questions that popped up this morning, and they were both good questions. One was, how do we take our current waiver residential portfolio and convert it into the new waiver portfolio? Essentially, taking 14 settings, with having some having a different tier effect into the new one. And the answer to that will be, we will do it carefully. Deborah Lempert's over here nodding, and Deborah has a spreadsheet of all spreadsheets, all lined up with all the waivers, all the waiver settings, which I think is close to 4,000, with every data set you could possibly have. And my initial view is about 80% of them will neatly land within a new setting without any controversy. And then there's going to be 20 that are going to fall closer to the margin of two tiers, of which we got to bring some discipline methodology to bear to make some of those final determinations. So bear with us until we start it. We're not going to do it without you. And as soon as we get the green light, we'll try to agree to get that 80% in the starting gate, and then focus our efforts on the 20% on how to best situate them, because where they situate them affects the actual daily rate that you get. And from my perch, the degree of difficulty of this is if the IDRD waiver rates are more positive, it'll be the easier lift, and if they're less positive, it'll be a harder lift. So we'll just have to wait until we get the final information, and then we'll take that on. But there's also a lot of details out there. One of the details brought up today was, we've always historically had certain ways we did things that, quite frankly, people, when they made them up 20 years ago, did it with the same thought process we're going in. What makes sense? And the one issue was, if the person's head is not in the bed at midnight, do you not get paid for that day's unit if the person had been around all day and just happened to went home with mom and dad for the night? They're the kind of things that we're going to have to really tease out, and we'll tease them out together. And the sooner we line them up, the more input we can get on them. We have the same consultants that helped us with the IDRD waiver, and we certainly can lean on what other states are doing for some of those finer details. So they will be worked out, but we just got to get going first. So thank you for your patience in advance.
We got a couple questions.
Sure.
Back up, Susan asked for the task force committees, what is the option for those meetings being broadcast in light of COVID and transparency?
If you want me to answer that, I will.
Sure.
Susan, I just sent you a message, but we are looking into the legality of that because there are so many members of that task force that are not on the commission. They are actually appointees, so they're public official. They aren't public officials, and weren't elected to those positions. So there's some legality issues that we're looking into regarding broadcasting that. We're going to be meeting with our attorneys on the 15th to talk with them about that and about FOIA. And hopefully we will have some answers on the 16th, and we'll be able to either move forward with broadcasting or not broadcasting based on the advice of legal counsel on the 16th. So I just wanted to clarify that for Susan John. Thanks, Susan.
All right.
Ralph says, do you know how much of a vacancy rate is being built into the new residential rates?
I have not seen the assumptions for the new residential rates, Ralph.
Okay. What is the anticipated approach to the 3-month reserve? Will it go away when we're fully fee for service?
I think that's one of those items on the list I just talked about, but I do believe that the whole, the overarching genesis to fee for service is to be transparent, get out of your way, add a level of market competition, and so I would say that would certainly be discussed. I'm not the decider, but I think the general tone around here is the less overhead, the better. But certainly we're regulators. We have to regulate if it's in the best interest of the system. But we'll take a hard look at that, and I don't want to prejudge it, but I certainly believe that's something that will get scrutinized deeply. And there's a whole long list of them. I have a list I've been tracking. One of them is, we several years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had a policy that restricts executive director's salary based on the size of the provider's revenue. That's on the list too. Just because, there's just things that we need to get out of because we need to focus on other matters of more importance, and certainly each one of those carries an administrative burden that all adds up over time. Legacy, 60 legacy properties. Andrew has been out to, last time I checked was the 3rd, so he said he'd be done by the end of September, so I'm going to give him to the middle of October. And he's just taking an inventory as an engineer contractor would as to the deficiencies that he feels of health and safety issues, roofs, health and safety issues, and major appliances. Anything else you want to add to the list? I know there's been a number of if you've had to have emergency fixes on any of those, Andrew's collecting that information. That'll be part of our overall settlement. But give us till the middle of October to get that information together. Give me an opportunity to kind of bring that and discuss it with the commission so we can kind of develop options to move forward with being compliant with the General Assembly's proviso. And the one new factor that has dropped into this equation, which is a fabulous factor, is the Housing Trust Fund. We met with them in a virtual meeting, and they're redoing all their policies, and they want to raise the maximum loan on our residents from $100,000 to as high as $300,000. And they were going to do their policy research over the next couple of months. We were providing them information on the number of residences we have that have fulfilled the 20-year requirement. So I'm optimistic that if that does shape up in a positive way, that will open the door for consideration of rolling some of these properties forward. And the way it works is you sell a property, half the equity gets rolled into the new property, the other half goes to the state, And then certainly the money that we would have put into improvements could come into play to make this all work, to resolve this issue. So I think that will really help the rolling option. And when you look at the 60 properties, I think 42 or 43 of them are 8-bed facilities, which are all could be candidates to roll into 2 4-bedroom facilities. Although there's a number of ICFs in there too, so that's a whole other thing. But adding that extra loan capacity, I think will make a difference in our options. Right, room and board. I got it, and there's nothing exotic in there. We're trying to be as clear as we can. There's no substantive changes, but as we know, the history of room and board, the clearer the better. And so if you're in the middle, you are in the middle of your financial statements and cost reports, there's nothing going to come out of there that's going to surprise you. It's just hopefully going to be clear. The issues that popped up on looking at room and board last year, which I sent out on that executive memo, was we had lessons learned. We had depreciation expenses, particularly vehicles that were being added to the house that were not proper. They had to be backed out. Not everybody was handling the SNAP benefit exactly correct, nor did everybody take advantage of the SNAP benefit. And I think that can be a big difference maker. And then the issue was the calculation of room and board should be based on license capacity. And as I'm looking at that, I think it could be based on so we can never be in a situation where we overcharge our individuals because of capacity issues of vacancies. So I don't want to have a blanket rule that you have to use your license capacity, although that's a general rule. But if you want to do extensive math, there may be a way to make it so that it's fair across the board. But we have to work on that one a little bit. And the last thing on room and board I want to talk about is, hang on a second here, is, and again, it's more of a statement or a question, and we're not going to resolve it here. But now that we're moving to fee for service, where I'm looking at everything really through each issue almost in a telescopic way to be as fair as we can across the board. And a lot of things in the capitated system, it just kind of was in the band somewhere and we never paid much attention to it. But my question, when I was looking at it, I looked at the average room and board for a CTH2 was $793. And the monthly SSI check is $794. And just over the last year, you know, we're all involved in these ad hoc conversations. I just kept on hearing a pattern where, you know, individuals in the care of a provider, there's a lot of expenses coming out of their overhead for clothing, necessities, lack of room and board. And so I'm just raising the issue, and I think we're probably going to do a survey and maybe ask just for the internal audit, maybe do some sampling, just to see what the extent of that problem is. But I would open up to the floor. Does that resonate with anybody to the extent of that problem, or is it not a big issue out there? Basically, our individual inability to pay room and board puts them in a deficit position of having enough discretionary cash to, you know, to be engaged in the community and those type of things. So we'll take a look at it. Don't feel like you have to weigh in. Two-factor authentication implementation. I want to thank you for your patience. If anybody's having a problem, call me afterwards. Most all you have my cell phone. You can call me on my cell phone or my desk number. But right now, some providers are having problems with their employees getting a timely two-factor authentication back on their emails. That seems to be there's some emails, whether it's us or the providers, and that's a bottleneck. And what we've been able to do as a short-term fix is allow that provider to flip the switch on their two-factor authentication to disable it while they work out all these little details. But we got to keep on working at the details because we got to flip that two-factor authentication on. because it's literally probably our best defense against computer intrusion. So if anybody's having problems, call me. We're working the issue, and hopefully in no time we'll get you all squared away. Okay, we talked about the proviso, two-factor authentication, fee for service. All right, any more questions over there?
Ralph says, does Housing Trust Fund have any funds that are forgivable after a period of time for renovations?
I don't know that question. I don't
We
know
can
that
ask, maybe we can check with Vicky.
question. Okay.
And when people come in, they often have no discretionary cash. Those in shelters and others need clothing, hygiene items, etc. We can use family support if these individuals are not yet on the waiver.
Okay. Well, they're the kind of little things that we got to worry about that in the past, it all got wrapped up. And now that we're all actually trying to be as precise as we can, I think we'd be remiss not to at least look at that issue. And I guess it really hit me when I looked at CRCS. They get the OSS payment, and the main reason for the OSS payment is provide enough funds for individuals to afford CRCS, so they don't have to go to a higher, more costly placement by the state. And I think a lot of our individuals fit that same category, but that benefit is not available to our individuals. So anyway, it's just something to think about, to be fair across the board. And I think that covers my list. Ladies, you got anything that we go to the order, and any more questions out there?
Nope, not right now.
Good. Save your energy. When we go to fee for service, I think that's going to generate a lot of the idiosyncratic type policies and procedures and how to handle it. And we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and really, get everybody's input and bring fairness to all those little issues that are between us and getting to fee for service. No more questions?
Will there be more guidance coming out about the cost reports? Questions related to waiver case management on the waiver cost report.
Well, waiver case management has been handled separately for 2 years. And I think next year we'll probably have to incorporate it into the waivers. But there's so much excess cost in the system this year. We're not gonna change in midstream.
And proper allocation of cost to the different funding sources.
Allocating the Medicaid costs, yeah. Well, that's part of the requirements. We should all know how to do that, but we can always go over it. All right.
That's it.
I saw that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Someone was asking about getting
recording the
the
meeting.
recordings.
Aren't they on the website?
No idea. Track down who sent that.
Beth Cody.
We're still
Cody.
green.
We're still good. People are leaving.
I guess record has to be somewhere, doesn't it?
You can ask Christy.
All right. Do we have to go in there to shut it off?
Probably.
Oh,